Hey, guys.
How's it going? How's it going?
ROMEOs.
How are we doing?
Very good.
Good. It's Romeo Day.
Wonder Bar.
I've never heard you guys say it wasn't going well.
Well, this is it. When we come here, it goes well. It's automatic.
We're retired old men expressing opinions.
What
can
could be
go
better,
wrong?
right,
What
Could
Naren?
be better.
So let's take this opportunity to welcome back our viewers and listeners.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Aki, anything you want to say to those wonderful people?
Always love to have you guys tune in. And please make sure that you like us and subscribe
Yeah, get off your asses, everyone. Come on. You can do
And
it.
comments.
and comment.
So I actually was somewhere this weekend where people quoted the two of you.
Who? Nuran and
Literally
myself?
the whole opening with
Really?
with Aki saying what he usually says, and of
It's
course
Romeo Day.
Nuran's infamous.
Bunch of motherfuckers.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, just fucking do it. What the hell?
Anyhow, great to have you along. Hope you enjoy.
Yep.
So, guys,
What are we talking about?
how about talking about tariffs?
Wow.
It seems that the U.S. and more specifically the President of the United States of America
Yeah.
Yeah.
has kind of thrown the world into turmoil
Yeah.
with his on again, off again stance on tariffs. So
Best ever.
thought it might be interesting for us to discuss.
Yeah. I think that's a really good
Yeah.
idea.
Good idea.
Greatest economy ever.
So why don't
Okay, are
we
you doing
define?
imitations or are you gonna?
Well, it brings out that in me.
You're
Okay,
not,
Nuran, get us started.
First of all, you're not orange enough. And okay, I think to start, I think we should first define what a tariff is and kind of make sure that everyone understands that tariffs are paid by the importer. The person that brings something into a country has to pay the tariff.
So you're describing
A
who
mechanism.
is responsible for paying the tariffs.
Correct.
But what are the tariffs?
So, well, the tariffs are imposed by a country on goods and services that are consumed or brought into a country. So, the U.S. Unilaterally, the president has invoked a measure, an emergency measure, which has given him the power, and Congress has ceded power to the president to put all sorts of tariffs in place for globally. And he demonstrated that and has gone back and forth. But before we get into the actual tariffs, I just wanted to talk about the mechanism of the tariff, because there are certain people that say, "Oh, China is going to pay the tariff," and it's the most ridiculous thing when I hear that, because it's completely false,
Okay,
untrue,
I'm
and
going to interrupt
lies.
you because I'm going to take a step back.
Okay.
Why have countries historically implemented tariffs?
Protect industries, certain specific industries. For example, Canada, we try to protect the U.S. the dairy market with 170% tariff.
Yeah, but there's a lot of nuance to that.
Okay, so historically, a country who wants to be protectionist
Yeah.
of a certain industry within that country will look at imports that are coming in cheaply from another country, which has the ability to destroy that industry.
Exactly.
And we'll say, I don't want that industry destroyed. So now, because you have cheap labor and my labor is more expensive, I'm going to put a 20, 30% tariff to, level the playing field, as they say.
So is it fair to say then, or to suggest that tariffs are, on the one hand, a tool that has been used by governments for protectionist purposes,
Definitely.
and also has been used to counter what has been perceived as unfair trade practices on the part of certain other countries?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and for currency devaluation.
So there's an awful lot of focus these days on U.S. imposed tariffs on virtually every country on the planet,
Yep.
but they are not the first or only country to implement tariffs, yet they're getting all of the attention.
Oh, it's because they always get the attention. They are the U.S. of A.
No, hold it a second. Let's be clear about this. I mean, the flip side of the tariff policy is that the world and economists have agreed that it was a failed policy. This is why
Sorry, what has been a failed policy?
using tariffs in order to protect your economy was a failed policy.
Okay, but Aki, my point was, that other countries have been and continue to use tariffs for the purposes we just described.
And we saw that. And the illustration of that was the Great Depression. We all know a bit, I think at this table we know about the Smoot-Hawley Act. A lot of people have heard talk about the Smoot-Hawley Act. That was the world when, that was the go-to policy of most major countries. And it was a disaster.
Aki, I'm not going back to the 1920s.
Yeah.
I'm talking
Today.
today. And in fact, prior to America announcing new tariffs, other countries had tariffs in place.
But we realized that was a failed policy.
Then why does Western Europe have tariffs on American-made automobiles?
They have. Those are errors. We all agree that those are errors.
Who
and
agrees?
we should be,
if there were errors, the Europeans wouldn't be doing it.
But Pat,
They're doing it for the purposes we just finished outlining.
Do we agree that
it's protectionist?
Do we agree? Do we agree that economists consider tariffs to be bad policy, bad economic policy? Do we agree?
No, we don't.
No.
Okay.
We don't at all, because tariffs, when done properly, are not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just you have to have the right policy.
Surgically.
Okay, so don't make a blanket statement that
But we're
says
not-
all tariffs are bad.
This is
all free trade isn't bad either, because you can destroy a country's manufacturing, like China did, by having cheap labor, for example, or slave labor, or whatever.
But Nuran, if you look at that example, manufacturing is also it's past. I mean, manufacturing is now declining.
Aki,
No, you can't.
It's easy
say
for
that-
you to say that.
No, you
But
can't say
that's
But
the
that.
there are
reality.
repercussions of that
But
manufacturing.
guys, hold
dying.
on. Let's not just make blatantly false statements.
Yeah.
Manufacturing is not past. Manufacturing exists today because there's a need to produce goods.
Okay, but
Where in the world those goods are produced is subject to myriad considerations.
for advanced economies, manufacturing is a smaller slice of their success. And the United States is the great example of that. Over 70% of the United States' success and economic growth is on the services side. This is the reality.
Okay, but actually, we're not
has
arguing
been over the course of the past generation.
We're not arguing about what the economy is. We're talking about tariffs specifically and what is good and or bad about them. But first of all, I want to get back to the fact that
the definition.
that the tariff is about incoming goods and is paid by the importer. So when you impose a tariff on a country, any goods coming in from that country will have a tariff that the importer has to pay. So if Walmart is buying a shit ton of stuff from China, when it comes in, Walmart has to pay that tariff, whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%, and their cost of goods goes up by that 10
Correct.
or 20%.
Correct.
So they will either have to swallow that
Or pass it on to
or
the
pass it
consumer
on to the
and drive
consumer.
up inflation.
There's a third element.
What's that?
Or negotiate a lower acquisition cost
price, that's
Exactly.
it.
on the part of the supplying
Correct.
country.
Yes.
And
So
that makes a lot of sense, because when you buy something in the store, every cost that the producer has is in that price.
absolutely. Transportation, cost of goods,
Well,
all of it.
social programs and everything. So what Pat just said is critical, because that can be done. Lower the purchase price.
Yes,
So
to a
that
certain
way-
point.
Why-
Yeah, but we're looking at the level of tariffs where that's not going to help you because your margins are so low.
No,
Even-
Aki.
even-
So, Aki, let me explain it to you differently. When they buy stuff from Canada, that
Sorry, who's they?
Well, let's say the U.S.
Okay.
Sorry. The U.S. buys from Canada. In that purchase price, there's all our social programs inputted in there. So the U.S. is paying for that. So why don't...
He's right. That's
No,
interesting.
how
That's
are
an
social
interesting-
how in a
that's an
private
interesting-
transaction are social
Aki,
programs?
he's right.
No, but it's hold on. What you just said,
That's an
Dominic,
interesting way to look at it.
is true for domestic consumption as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
All Dominic
Yeah.
is saying
exactly.
is that
Yeah, cost of goods.
the cost of goods that a manufacturer is selling, whether it's domestically or to a foreign country, include all costs. So if you have labor costs,
payroll taxes
in labor are all the
That's
social
it.
programs that both the employee and the employer
okay.
have to contribute to, and so on and so forth. That's all he's saying.
Okay.
part of the cost
and
of
it's
goods.
technically correct.
That's what I've been saying. Why should the U.S. pay for our social programs?
Dominic, they don't think of it that way.
No, I know.
Clearly, the U.S. will purchase, and this is part of the problem that I think Trump is trying to address,
Exactly.
which is that companies, regardless of where they're based, are interested in maximizing their profits. How do they maximize their profits?
by getting the largest
by,
price.
Minimizing costs.
by charging
The
as
most.
much for their goods and services as the market will allow, and by securing the goods and services, and that includes manufacturing, importing, outsourcing, whatever,
as cheaply
for the
as
lowest possible cost.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how you maximize your profits.
Yeah.
They don't care about much else.
That's what companies do.
For-profit companies exist for the purpose of generating the highest possible profits to reward their shareholders. Period.
Exactly.
And the Americans are not talking about what you're talking about. He's not even. There's no reference to social programs.
Hang on. The only comment I'll make on that, you're correct. Obviously, you're correct with what you said. The only thing is the final product has to have a price point which is competitive. And if they're not, then they're not going to sell their product.
Well,
so, yes, so Canadian companies may have to make less profit on their product.
If let's stick with the Canada-US example. If the Canadian dollar is trading at a significant discount to the U.S. currency,
like it is, correct.
like it has been for the last few years,
Yeah.
then even though certain costs may be higher in Canada, because of the value of the dollar, it is still less expensive for an American company to secure certain goods and or services from Canadian suppliers.
Definitely.
Right?
The salaries
in the
are
same
much
way
lower.
as this whole idea, and I'm using Apple as an example, that somehow the government is going to force Apple's hand to bring manufacturing of cell phones back to America.
Yeah. Good luck.
Even if you impose significant tariffs, the cost will be cheaper to have those phones manufactured either in China or in India or in some other Asian country and to import them subject to tariffs rather than try and manufacture in the U.S.
Yeah, imagine trying to find a workforce.
And today, that would generally be true for most consumer electronic products.
Yeah. And if you bring back that manufacturing, all they're going to do is automate to the maximum.
They will automate to the maximum, but you'll still need some human being.
Yeah, I know.
So all
Very
those,
little.
yeah, so all those Americans that are expecting, that are looking forward to jobs.
They don't need jobs. That's the thing. They're
That's
almost
the
at
other
full
thing. Oh,
employment.
the other thing.
Guys, there
That is the other
are other factors.
Yeah.
Because whatever country you're manufacturing in, you have to have the supply of raw materials.
Yeah, supply chain.
And if you're paying a fortune in order to move raw materials from various regions of the world to your country so you can perform manufacturing or final assembly,
Efficient supply
it
chain.
may not be as cost effective as to have the assembly or manufacturing occur as close to where the source materials are.
Yeah.
And to then only pay the cost of shipping those products when they have gone through final assembly.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything pertains to dollars and cents. And companies as successful as Apple have the brightest financial minds working on this stuff and the brightest logistical minds
Think of their
in the
supply
world
chain.
working on this stuff.
Think of their supply chain. Think of how complex the supply chain is and how fine-tuned it's been, because they've been shaving pennies off of that supply chain for the past 20 years.
So Tim Cook is the CEO of Apple and has been since,
it's Tim Apple, isn't it?
right? So Tim Cook's background is what?
Is it a logistics?
Supply chain and logistics. That was his expertise.
Exactly.
Well, that's what it takes. I mean,
His whole career prior to joining Apple.
think of how finely tuned that supply chain is.
Of course.
Just like the automotive industry, how finely tuned that supply chain was and how it's been potentially upended with these tariffs.
That's what Amazon is. Logistics.
So you just made the case, Pat, that this is economically counterproductive.
I didn't make that
No,
case.
no. Because to use Pat's argument about the currency, that's one thing with China, is that their money, they control it. Like, there's no market for it. There's no market, so they decide what rate.
Well, let's be clear. Under the communist regime, it's actually the government. So the U.S. has prided itself, for the most part, with the exception of the current president, on having a central bank that operates arm's length. Right? They don't take direction from the president.
Until now.
Well, he still doesn't.
No, he's still
He's
not.
trying.
Oh, yeah.
He's trying. He's trying to tell Powell what to do.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, but Powell. So,
Yeah.
so the central banker is not taking
For now.
the direction. Well, as long as he's
Okay.
holding that position.
Not replaced.
He's He's trying hard.
So depending on the political regime that is in place, there are differences in how currencies are managed.
Yeah, so you can devalue a currency. So
Exactly.
if the value of the currency comes down, then all of a sudden it's easier to export to other countries because the currency of the other country can buy more and will lower the cost of goods as an importer. So I mean, we got to make sure.
So guys, let's come back to tariffs, because this whole broad brush, some people would like you to think that tariffs are a universally bad thing, or tariffs are a universally good thing. Neither statement is correct.
Right.
Exactly. It's got to be done in an intelligent way, which is not the way the U.S. did it initially, which was essentially a broad brush. We're going to put tariffs on everyone on the planet, including uninhabited islands, apparently.
Yeah.
And
No, not in uninhabited.
Penguins.
all right,
There are no
so-
humans.
Right. So until penguins get an idea of commerce, I think we're covered there. So yeah, the broad brush way that things were done, I believe, was done, and you know, it's kind of. I believe it's evident now that this broad brush approach that Trump took was his way to negotiate, which is coming into a room, slapping everyone in the face a few times, leaving, and then coming back afterwards and saying, "Does anyone want more?" So his slap in the face to the world was putting all these tariffs on there, upending the stock market, wiping trillions of dollars off of everyone's 401ks in order to just shock the world, cause chaos, come back and say, just kidding, now we can negotiate. That's what he did. That's exactly what he did, but that's the way he does everything.
So no, that's what he did.
Yeah, but that's his style.
Part of the issue, I think, for America and the world is that nobody really knows what to expect.
Uncertainty.
So in business,
Yeah, of course.
you require certainty as much as you can have it. There are always going to be events that occur in the world that are unpredictable, and you have to adapt and adjust and so on. There are others, however, where we have come to realize that if we can provide certainty, then it gives businesses what they need in order to make important decisions, oftentimes of a strategic nature,
Yeah, like capital spending.
and implement those with confidence, and then course correct as need be.
Exactly.
The recent upheaval has essentially led to organizations on not only in America, but
Globally.
everywhere around the world,
Globally, yeah.
not being able to make important decisions as to how they need to move forward. Because depending on the day or the time of day, what comes out of the US president's mouth, which is highly influential and impactful, could change.
Even time of night.
It's unpredictable.
Yeah, it's
So imagine the business case that any business makes for a capital expenditure. I'm going to open a plant here. I'm going to expand here. I'm going to do this. Imagine the business case that's required, which has tons of inputs, and now you can't rely on any of them because you don't know if there's going to be tariff imposed, what your cost of goods are going to be, who you can ship to, what the reciprocal tariff might be from the other country who
But-
got pissed off.
So what we're seeing on the part of some companies, some businesses,
it's
is that
freeze.
in the near term, they're going to bring down their costs because they know that the demand for their products and services is going to be severely impacted in the US, which is the largest consumer market in the world. In other regions of the world, there's no change really.
Yeah.
There's no change in the consumption practices.
right.
But in the US, which is the largest consumer market, it has a significant impact.
Well, I'll just say that because there are reciprocal tariffs that are happening, some other countries will also feel inflationary pressure for goods that are being shipped from the U.S. to those countries. So,
But the goods aren't necessarily shipped from the US. I'll use Apple as an example.
and I'm saying the
if-
reciprocal tariffs.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying is I'll use the example of Apple just to stick to an earlier point. So if Apple's phones are manufactured predominantly in China and India today, and the products are flowing from those countries to other countries in the world, whether it's Western European countries, Canada, Australia, US, wherever. The fact that the US has imposed tariffs means that the goods that are coming into the US are subject to the tariffs.
Right.
But if the products are flowing directly from India or China to Canada, they are not. There's no new tariffs being imposed.
I'm talking about the reciprocal tariffs that from goods that are made in the U.S. that are going to Europe, for example. those costs will go up. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
But the companies that are being most impacted,
Yeah,
if you look at the disproportionate impact on, I'll use the example of
I agree.
consumer electronics,
Peace. I agree.
automobile.
I agree.
Okay.
The U.S. is the number one consumer on the planet.
That's my point.
Yeah.
The fact that China is going to buy less grain products from the U.S. from U.S. farmers
Yeah.
is not having the same kind of impact on the overall economy. It's just not.
It's okay.
So
Okay.
Peace.
So when we have a Republican so-called business savvy leadership that is manipulating normal market mechanics for their benefit, isn't that a bit of socialism?
For their benefit.
For their political benefit?
No, I don't think it's for their political benefit because this is highly unpopular.
Yeah, exactly.
I think.
Well, their base.
No, what we may question today, and again, we're going to be careful because we don't have any tangible evidence to support this. But there are some people who are suggesting that some of the pronouncements and announcements on the part of the U.S. president have manipulated the financial markets, and that a number of people have made out very well, either shorting
exactly.
or getting in at the
Exactly.
opportune time
Exactly.
because they had advanced knowledge of what the president was going to announce.
I'm just saying my point is though for a movement that is so rabid about government intervention, this is massive government intervention in changing the course of economic development.
Yeah.
Well, that's what governments do.
What's your point, though?
No, but the Republic, I'm sorry, it's a free market government. It's a pro-business government. It's an anti-government. It's an anti-government movement.
No. Wait a second. If we're talking about the U.S. specifically, because again,
I'm talking about Trump.
tariffs are more than just U.S. The current U.S. government was elected on the promise of America first.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and everything he's announcing and doing supports his America first. You may
Okay.
disagree with it, but it supports his America first agenda.
So and
that's all.
my criticism my criticism is
can argue that,
my
but-
criticism
Go ahead.
is my criticism is you cannot have it both ways. You cannot expect America first and then welcome government intervention to achieve that. There's a huge contradiction in that.
Well, Aki, the second phase
I
of
don't
that.
understand that.
Yeah, he's trying to say that the
We're
conservatives
talking
are like
about-
socialists, but because the government is
This is
being
the-
used
well-
to change.
Exactly.
Governments are involved.
I know, but let's
This is governments. We agree, but when we talk about Trump Republicans, aren't they arch anti-government, arch for small government, no government intervention in economics?
Small government.
Isn't that their playbook?
No.
Okay, so
We're
I
seeing
think it
the
is.
opposite.
So America First is trying to bring manufacturing back, and the only thing that I'll say is what he's doing. The overarching desire is one thing, but what he's doing is not going to achieve his goals because he's trying to bring manufacturing of T-shirts back to the U.S. It's
Shoes?
that's not the thing that you want to be doing.
I don't think any of us really know what the motivation is.
Well,
You may interpret certain actions and behaviors in a certain
Okay.
way.
Yes.
But he's an individual. It's very hard to get inside his head.
okay, but if
And
you
it's
go
also
by what he
interesting to
says,
see. It's also interesting to see who amongst his inner circle he listens to on various subjects. So, some people until very recently thought that whatever Elon says,
no, he does.
he's going to do. Well, clearly, Elon, for however you perceive him, is not pro-tariffs
No, that is true.
for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And as much as he's against tariffs and believes in open and free trade, Trump isn't budging. On the other hand, Peter Navarro, and we should spend a moment talking about Peter Navarro.
Yeah.
Peter Navarro has Trump's ear when it comes to tariffs.
Yep.
Based on a great expert, an economic genius that Peter Navarro quoted in his book.
Yeah, Ron
Pat?
something or another.
Ron
Vara, I believe it is,
Yeah, something.
which is an acronym of Navarro.
Yeah. So could you imagine?
So someone who doesn't exist, he uses essentially his own name,
Yep.
jumbled,
As
in order to create a fictional character
that supports his
who is an
views.
economic guru,
Yes.
and who supports Navarro's position.
Yeah.
and this is
And until now, nobody had called that.
and he has
nobody.
the ear of the president of the United States.
More than that. He's
Yeah.
setting policies. So let's get back to what we're talking about here, guys.
Yeah.
We have tariffs that have been imposed on the rest of the world
by the U.S.
by the US.
Yeah.
And the world has responded, and China has also imposed tariffs on the U.S. So has Canada, so has Mexico, so has the EU, etc. So now we have tariffs, we have counter tariffs, and now all of a sudden they've all been postponed for 90 days. So that and they're down to only 10%
For now.
For now, the 90-day postponement, and now he has to negotiate 100 trade deals with 100 other countries in these next 90
Oh, it doesn't
days.
have to be 100. It's going to be the
The top 10 or the top 20. Okay, so now he has to do 10 or 20 tariff deals that are going to now be more granular,
10 at most.
that need to be looked at so that they can understand what how things get affected. And now CEOs are up at arms because their supply chains have been, over the past 20, 30 years, meticulously been crafted so that they could lower their costs, like what Pat said, which is to lower your cost of goods, lower your manufacturing, lower it to the point where you can make the most amount of profit. And now everything's been upended. So every company now that has any kind of global presence or manufacturing that has more than one site has to figure out their operations nightmare, and there's no certainty at all as to where it's going to land.
Correct.
So how do you fix it?
So before we get to how you're going to fix it, I'm curious as to who you guys think wins and loses, if there are winners and losers under this current scenario, from a short-term perspective. And short term, let's call it over the course of the next
Year?
12 months or so.
Yeah.
Versus long term perspective.
Or 3 to 5 years midterm.
I think
So midterm would be, I would say, because the regime is not going to change in America, right? They've been elected, they're in office, it's early days. They're here for 4 years, perhaps longer, depending on who you believe. So one thing is first certain. Until the midterm elections in the U.S., which occur in 2026,
He can do what he
it's
wants.
the Trump agenda.
Yeah, he does what he wants.
So let's
Right.
look at it
Next-
through that window.
Okay, year and a half.
Year and a half.
Okay.
And then from a longer term perspective, who do you think the winners and losers
so.
may be?
To answer that question, I think it depends on what the markets do. He's obsessed.
Which markets?
The stock market.
No.
He's obsessed with the stock market.
No, he's not.
I think you don't think Donald Trump is obsessed with the stock market? If you
he's
listen to all the
Yeah,
statements
but
that he made
answer
during
his
the
question,
campaign.
though. Who benefits?
But this is the
Can I answer it?
No, let me just finish, then I'll go to you. Okay, so if the stock markets really continue to tank, and there's a real crisis in the stock market,
Right.
He has to. I think he will react, and he will pull back, and he will adjust.
That doesn't answer my question.
He already
the
did,
question
by
is
the
So
way.
he will listen. So he will listen. If the stock markets tank, he will listen to Elon Musk and to the anti-tariff voices.
Okay, but who wins and who loses? That's the question.
So short term,
The anti-tariff. If the markets collapse, it's the anti-tariff.
Which
people.
country wins?
Is that your question? What
Yes.
is a country?
Who wins?
Individuals?
Yeah.
What-
If it's a
be more
trade war,
specific.
it's predominantly
Which country?
countries.
the short term, it's going to be the world. Longer term, U.S.
It lose
Sorry,
or-
who
Win.
wins?
The U.S. will win in the
Short
longer
term.
term.
Actually, I think the opposite.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, because right now the rest of the world has been slapped in the face and is putting together bilateral and multilateral trade agreements with everyone except the U.S. So Canada, for example, is figuring out, holy shit, we're the number 3 or 4 on the planet with respect to oil reserves.
Yeah.
So, and we've been selling like 90% of it to the U.S.
Yeah, because they're next door.
Exactly.
Goes back to the supply chain.
So now we're going to figure out, hey, we should have built those pipelines years ago across the country, which idiots didn't do
Very long term.
because we had the libtards, as you say, figuring out that, oh my God, any piece of land it goes through, we have to ask everyone
Oh
for
my
permission
God.
and all this
Oh my
rest of
God.
the
Oh
shit.
my God.
And our economic prosperity was fucked because we didn't put these pipelines in
I'll
place.
tell you
So-
why I think that.
Okay.
So hang on.
Hold on, let him finish thought.
All right. So now countries like Canada, who have these great natural reserves of oil, gas, minerals, potash, all this other stuff, can now sell to the rest of the world without focusing solely on the U.S. And the ones that are going to lose are the U.S. longer term, because all of a sudden all these bilateral, trilateral agreements, multilateral agreements are going to not include them. So all of a sudden everyone else will be selling to everyone else on a trade basis, and the U.S. longer term is going to be screwed because their supply for stuff that they need is going to be cut off, like China did recently, by the way, for stuff that they need in order to build fighter planes, because they've got the rare earth minerals that are needed to put together these exotic metals.
They're also dictatorships, so they move.
Hang on, it doesn't matter about dictatorship or not. He's talking about who wins and who loses. The U.S. will lose overall if they don't figure this shit out.
I agree with you. Okay, I just go back to Canada. I don't believe anybody thinks that unconditional development should just be the policy of any country.
How have we done so far with conditional development that didn't develop what we needed as a fucking country?
We did not do it properly, but the principle is still stands.
So if we didn't do it properly, why are you arguing
against it? But that's not
it?
the main. All I'm saying is, you just have to be a little more realistic and look at, the kind of obligations that we have.
Why is he being unrealistic?
Why do we put handcuffs on our economic prosperity? Why?
What do you define as handcuffs? Too much regulation, too much negotiation.
Not putting a fucking pipeline between Alberta and the East Coast.
When Quebec and major parts of your country are against pipelines, you have to deal with that as a federal government.
What you do is you say, you know what,
so
we
it's
are
not a police
imposing
state.
this because we're a federal government, and this is for the prosperity of our fucking country. Instead of being a third world fucking country, we can get the fucking dollars flowing in.
We're not a third world country, but anyway, let's move on so that I think you'll be happy with me. I agree with your ultimate conclusion. I agree with you that the Americans.
Why argue?
Because you're just you're taking liberties with the way you explained our development and pipeline policies. All I'm saying is that at the end of the day, you're right. It's the United States that is going to lose out, because the whole knock on tariffs is it makes ultimately the economy less efficient, less competitive, more insulated, and more inefficient.
What about you, Pat?
Right? Do we agree with that? So this is what tariffs do in the long term. This is what tariffs do, and if this continues, and they do continue with this tariff policy the way they're doing it, then ultimately the United States is going to lose its greatest strength of being a dynamic and innovative economy.
I'll argue that they already have, because everyone woke up now.
What about you, Pat?
So
answer your own question.
Yeah, I think that the country that comes to mind for me, both in terms of short and long term winning, is China.
Yeah.
China.
China. Yeah.
And that's the flip side of it.
Because there are a number of countries that followed the U.S. lead and felt that China posed a threat in many respects. And now with the recent U.S. actions, they really have no choice but to reopen discussions and negotiations with the Chinese as a major supplier of goods, including automobiles.
Yeah, BYD is going to be laughing their fucking ass off.
They could become an unbelievable success story globally, everywhere but the U.S., as an example.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I think long term, China stands to benefit to an even greater extent.
I agree.
So to me, the easy answer is China. I think that there are some other countries. So Europe is an interesting one, because Western Europe, which seems on the surface to be getting its act together in a number of areas that have been just completely ignored for the better part of a generation now, I still don't envision Western Europe moving quickly.
No.
Right? I don't think that speed is one of their qualities.
Well, democracies are slow.
Well, it's not just democracies.
Yeah.
There's still some.
You have
socialist democracies.
You have a number of countries that are really leaning heavily towards socialism.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't throw out socialism when we're talking about Republicans playing with the rules of economics.
For all the arguments in favor of further developing their economies, there are going to be those at the table who say, yes, but have we considered the impact on the environment? And have we considered the following? And it's going to move very, very slowly.
Exactly.
I hope for their sake it doesn't, that they find a way to accelerate the pace at which they can make decisions and execute them. But I'm not all that hopeful.
I think mindsets are changing. I think,
and I think there are other countries that also have the potential to move quickly. So one example would be South Korea, which has demonstrated over the last generation that they can make stuff happen in a hurry.
Yeah.
They could benefit significantly as well.
Yeah, and Japan,
I think Japan has there's a window of opportunity for Japan
and for Canada. If we get our fucking act together.
There is for Canada. What I would say about Canada, because I want to come back to some of your earlier comments, is that if we don't get out of this mindset that it's all about our natural resources, which I agree is the opportunity in the immediate term.
Correct.
But if we don't build industries for the future, we're going to be screwed.
Yeah, but we need a base, and we've rotted our base.
I agree with you.
That's the thing that kills me.
I agree with you. All I'm saying is that if we don't get out of this mindset that because we're rich in natural resources, we have all these opportunities.
We don't need to do anything else. Yeah.
We need to do a whole lot more.
Agreed. 100% agree.
So for
we
me,
agree.
the natural resources are a way in the short term to rebuild our
Build your base.
to rebuild our economy
Exactly.
to the point where we can then invest.
Yeah, lower our taxes
In our future.
You know what?
Yeah.
Like there's so much wealth that you can inshore with with what we have and use that as the base to grow our technology, grow the AI, grow all of the stuff that we have. We have all these universities. We've got
Aerospace.
smart people. We just don't have that fucking base, and it's rotting. Our infrastructure is crumbling because of bad decisions. But that's not what we came here to talk about.
we also haven't seen across all Canadian provinces a commitment to contribute to the greater good.
Well, let's start with
There is still a very selfish,
Yeah.
and I would say two of the largest
Ontario and
provinces, Alberta and Quebec, are very nationalistic, not from a Canadian perspective, from a provincial perspective, and that is standing in the way of some of the progress that Canada as a whole has to make.
Right, and what's very important is that's the low hanging fruit for us. Interprovincial trade, for the love of God, is the low hanging fruit. I mean, now we've been talking about this now since December, since this crisis with Trump has erupted. Where are we? I mean, I still understand. I still can't buy Ontario wine in Quebec. So where are we doing? I mean, that's low hanging fruit.
Well, you're just supporting my point.
So I am supporting your point. I'm saying, but I'm saying I'm putting the focus on interprovincial trade. It's so easy. It's low hanging fruit. Let's do that. Economists have suggested,
including pipelines.
Pipelines, absolutely. We have to do it all, and I think people are there finally. This is
Not yet, because all of a sudden
I think people are there.
They were for like a week or two. This is what I don't like about Canada. Okay, for a week or two, everyone got riled up, and everyone was wrapping themselves up in our flag, and it was all patriotic. Canada, Canada, Canada. We love you. We love Alberta.
Not everyone.
Well, a lot of people, all right? The country kind of got patriotic all of a sudden, and people were talking about, bringing down interprovincial trade barriers, and let's build the pipelines east to west, north to south, all over the place. Let's get all this shit done. Now, because Trump all of a sudden decided, we're going to take the tariffs away, and CUSMA, or the U.S. free trade agreement with Mexico and us, is exempt, and all of this stuff. All of a sudden, the pressure came down, and now we're not hearing as much about it.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, part of it, Naren, to be fair, is that there is a federal election in Canada, and until there's a clear outcome.
Yeah, but you'd think that the people who are running for office would be screaming at the top of their lungs that this is what needs to be done.
Not surprisingly,
exactly.
Those people are saying what they think needs to be said in order to secure a win.
Right. But on a more, sorry, Dominic, just a quick
drives
point.
me nuts.
Naran, the workers in Ontario, the auto workers that work for Stellantis, I'm sure this is top of mind. That we have to be better managers of our economy, and we have to do more, to develop our own national economic potential. Those workers, those are big industries.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the workers. I'm talking about our politicians at this point.
It's the people
not having
that are
the
drive
balls.
this.
Canadian patriotism is opportunistic.
Yeah.
It's fake.
Oh,
For
come
the
on.
most part.
Explain that. Explain that.
Because all of a sudden everybody was, when did you hear about Canada before?
1967.
Well, I'd say not
Well,
everybody. Look, the fact of the matter is, I come back to Alberta and Quebec are not nationalistic as it pertains to Canada.
Yeah.
They're nationalistic from a provincial standpoint first.
Totally.
That's their priority. That never changed.
Yeah, so Quebec, I understand from a linguistic perspective, and Alberta is just because Canada fucked them so hard for so many years
hold it
that
a
they
second.
hate Canada.
Okay, hold it a second.
Don't hold it. You're going to argue with me that Alberta hasn't been fucked by Canada?
For most of its history, it was an economic backwater, and then it hit the oil
How
bonanza.
long ago?
Okay.
How long ago?
The 40s, the 50s.
Yeah, and
Okay.
So
all I'm saying
how many
is,
years have they been punished by Canada by not being able to get their product to the fucking places it needs to go so they can have economic prosperity
all I'm saying
and
is
pass it on to the rest of us?
The balanced argument is they also benefited from Confederation. It was under Confederation that they were able to reach this level of development.
Oh, the oil got there because of Confederation?
Well, what do you mean? They were what? They were an island in the Arctic before, and it all happened. It came from the sky. There was no government, no policy.
Confederation
no
didn't bring oil to them. Oil was there. Confederation fucked them.
Why do we let our emotions get the better of us?
Because
because we're Mediterranean.
I hear one person saying that there's untapped potential for Alberta.
Yes.
And so many people in Alberta resent the fact that they haven't been able to prosper to a greater extent than they've realized, given the conditions they have to operate under. And that's a perfectly legitimate statement.
Okay, is it also legitimate to point out that historically Alberta, as a province of Canada, was able to achieve this potential? By being supported by a confederation, having the means to sustain itself.
They got screwed by the confederation because if they had the pipelines put in place, they would have been much richer and much better off as the rest of the country would have been.
So if they were left, if they were an independent entity somewhere,
fuck the independence. Just allow them to build the fucking pipeline.
Historically, they did well under the Canadian Confederation system.
Guys, pause, and then we're going to get back to tariffs. 1 second, Aki, how old is Canada?
What, 1867. So
tell me, how old is Canada?
What is it? 140,
60 some odd years.
60.
So about 160 years old, and you say Alberta has been prospering from oil development and production for how many years now?
All I'm saying...
answer the question.
No, I'm not.
Answer the question.
Because it's not a simple answer to that question. All I'm trying to point out is that historically, Alberta also, as a Canadian, do we agree that as a province of Canada, Alberta was able to achieve a great status as an oil developer?
It was as a province of Canada that achieved not as status. Great as they believe they had the potential to achieve.
If we had a pipeline between Alberta and the East Coast,
Naran,
would they have been better off or not?
Naran,
just answer that question.
Naran,
yes or no?
Probably they could have been
not
better.
Probably.
But
yes.
it's not just about oil. It's not just about one thing. It's also about there is an environmental consideration.
Why the fuck is it always about something else?
Well, what do you want?
When it comes to dollars,
talk to Albertan farmers who have to fight with drought.
If you want this country to have a universal basic income, if you want this country to have social programs that are going to catch everyone in the safety net, you need revenue. If you want revenue, then enable the things that get you revenue by putting the fucking pipeline in that's going to give us billions and hundreds of billions of revenue that's going to now support all the social shit that you want. But if you can't fucking let them do that, you're not going to get your fucking social programs.
I wish you felt more strongly about it.
We're fucking ourselves. I want social programs too.
We're not a dictatorship.
But we need money to fucking make them.
We are not China and we're not a dictatorship. So when you put in major infrastructure projects, there are communities that are impacted. There's provincial authority. It's a confederation.
The greater good is what we talk about in democracies.
We are a democracy.
That's what I just said.
We're not a one-party state. This is what democracy looks like.
You want greater good or not?
You have to be able to negotiate, and you have to be able to get other partners online, and you have to talk to your stakeholders.
You have to do all this. You have to bullshit. You don't have to do a fucking thing. What you have to do is implement and make the shit happen.
So when the courts rule that your pipeline is illegal because you're violating First Nation communities or you're violating provincial jurisdictions, what do you do with that, Naran?
What you do is you legislate. What you do is you legislate.
It's court
you fucking legislate.
It's court decisions.
You know what a court decides on? The court decides on laws. You can legislate the fucking laws. Okay. That's what we fucking hire these bastards to do, and they're not doing it.
Stop this stupid outrage. Because the point is, we're living in a democracy, and it's complicated. Could we do more? Look, we're not.
I'm saying we're fucked up.
We're not
fucked up. We fucked up our opportunities.
Now we have
guys. We're going to bring it back to tariffs. Right. All I'm going to say to close this off is in support of Nuran's point about the pipelines.
Yes.
The fact that today, only as a result of Trump's pronouncements, has Canada come to realize, most Canadians have come to realize that it would have been and is today in the country's best interest to build out the pipeline.
Let's lay some pipe, people.
Period.
Okay.
Period.
Okay.
No, let's stop there. Back to tariffs.
I love you, Aki.
So Duran, you're arguing against a guy who was against tariffs who wears a Pepe Jeans t-shirt.
Okay.
You go.
Okay.
Well, Yeah, but Trump is pro-tariffs, but all the MAGA hats have labels that say they're manufactured in China.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so the winner. So to your question, your very important question is, so in terms of country, the one that's going to benefit the most, and I agree with you, is China. And in terms of politics and political leverage, again, I stick to my argument that if the markets continue to cause a lot of concern, it's the anti-tariff people that are going to fall out of favor with Trump.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you.
I
on
think
that.
one of his objectives that we've not talked about is that I think he wants to mitigate the damages AI will have on jobs.
I don't think he's thinking that.
No.
Yeah, I think
He's not.
I think so because
I don't think he would be tooting the whole, bring manufacturing back to America if he was that concerned with the impact of artificial intelligence.
well,
What do you guys think?
I mean,
about,
the Chinese, and again, we're not always certain what's behind the
Yeah,
curtain,
they're-
but the Chinese recently have shown
they're way ahead.
that they're making advancements
Yeah.
that far exceed
Yeah.
what we perceived America's capabilities to be
Yeah,
yeah.
they have a lot of
in
that.
the area of AI.
Yeah. But I think, eventually, you want, I don't think he's thinking that he'll have a lot of manufacturing jobs, but at least creation jobs, intellect jobs.
There's two things here. Number one, which is very, very illustrative, is that he considers his model is the 19th century United States up to the early 20th century United States. When he said
The
that
Gilded Age.
between 1860 and 1910, before the First World War, that was the greatest economy we ever had. That's the model that he's looking at. Which, when you look at it, it's nonsense. It was, it was a completely, the United States was a backwater. It wasn't even a major power back then, and it was all, it was oligarchs, and it was just a horrible society.
Robber barons.
And robber barons.
Well, maybe that's what he wants.
That's
to
what he
return
wants.
to.
Maybe you're right. So that's number one. And number two, what about his ultimate objective? I think is just to defeat China, to shut out China.
No.
No,
No.
So,
He's at war with everybody. What are you talking about?
It's U.S. first.
Look how he's treating members of NATO. Look at
145% tariffs, with China.
Yeah, but he just said all electronics are exempt and all silicon is exempt and all the.
and we
all
don't
the
know what he's going to
all-
say later today or tomorrow.
Yeah,
Come on,
that's
it's a moving target with him.
Yeah, that is true.
And it doesn't matter what the outcome is, because he'll put a spin on it that is, well, this is what I intended all along.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
It's like the last.
And a large number of people
We'll believe him.
will believe him.
Yeah, like the last free trade agreement that he negotiated with Canada. I mean, the only concessions that he got was on the supply side, where they got more access to our agricultural market. A small change on the supply side, and he sold that as this is now the greatest free trade
Deal.
agreement, which 95% of it was exactly as it was.
Yeah, but that's
doesn't
that's
matter.
a
But
politician.
doesn't
But that's
matter.
exactly his game.
But that's what politicians do. So
Yeah, but this is his game. He's going to claim victory.
Listen,
At the first
he-
opportunity, he's
They're
going
all
to claim
the same.
victory. And it's going to be marginal. It's going to be marginal changes. But he's going to declare victory. In the meantime, he would have just run amok.
So, guys, let's talk a little bit about tariffs and what happens with inflation when you impose tariffs. So, right now we've been coming down with the inflationary side over the past several years. Interest rates have been coming down because inflation has been tamed. Employment remained high, meaning people had jobs. So economies were doing well. They weren't going into recession. We had the soft landing. Everything that was perfect, that could have been perfect from a COVID, post-COVID perspective, was happening globally. Everything was fine. And then Trump came and said, fuck you to everybody. And now impose things that are,
The great genius.
well, for whatever, let's not denigrate the man, that great man that he is. And he imposed these tariffs that are now going to be inflationary globally. And that's going to happen, potentially putting the U.S. and other countries into recession over the next 3 to 6 months, which we'll only see after it happens.
And make China stronger.
But whoever is in his ear on all economic matters
Navarro.
are taking a very contrarian approach to things, because what we're hearing from the regime is tariffs are called for. Tariffs are going to be a wonderful thing. At the same time as there's this constant pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates at a time when the Fed is saying that would be the wrong thing to do.
Of course.
Right? The timing is off.
Yep.
So it seems that he and some of his key or most influential economic advisors have a completely different view of how this game should be played.
Well, I think he looks at it as, I put a tariff, I impose tariffs, I'm going to get income. Because tariffs, if he imposes tariffs 20, 30, 40%, he's going to get hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars, all else being equal, meaning the amount of trade remains the same and people keep buying the same amount, which is not a sure thing. In his mind, he's going to have a whole bunch of income, which he can now use to give tax breaks to people. And to the people that he wants to give them to, which are his friends, the billionaires, the richer people, but as well the middle class and the lower class.
Well, no, because if you look realistically, and I haven't done any math on this, but I would just suggest that the tariffs that have been announced,
which ones? The latest tariffs, I guess. Okay.
The most recent scenarios,
Okay,
are going to cause most middle class and certainly lower income earners to incur a significantly higher cost of living.
right. So
And
inflation.
and the tax breaks they're likely to get, the percentages may be impressive, but what that translates to into sheer dollars
Exactly. I agree with you.
is insignificant.
I agree with you. It's gonna
And so the cost of
benefit
living
the more-
it's going to benefit the
rich.
The rich.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
And in the meantime, explode the deficit and the debt.
Well, no. So this is the idea. His idea, I believe, this is my guess, is I believe in his head from an economic perspective, from Navarro and those guys, they're saying, listen, it's going to bring a shit ton of money into your country and it's going to allow you to now lower taxes. So now people are going to love you because all of a sudden, wow, they have less taxes to pay. That's what I think that's his end game, or that was his end game. But he doesn't understand the intricacies of inflation, of what you just
Well,
said.
I think the billionaire class and let's call them the near billionaire class are going to benefit.
Anyone over $1 million in revenue, let's say a year, is going to benefit from that.
But that's a small percentage of the population.
Okay.
I know, but he's thinking, well, I'm going to be able to lower everyone's taxes, so everyone's going to love me. I don't think he's thinking ahead of, oh my God, inflation is going to now rob them of any benefit, any taxation benefit, by making their disposable income disappear just by buying groceries or going to the dollar store and everything's now $5 instead of $1.
And the unemployment rate will likely rise because as much as he talks about bringing jobs back to America, most companies, in the current situation, are actually going to reduce their workforce.
I agree.
Well, tax
with
cut
uncertainty.
Because their revenues are going to decline.
Yeah, and their expansion is any capital expenditures, all of that stuff, all their business cases are going to be fucked up.
I don't think the tax cuts are going to compensate the people for the higher costs of construction and housing, the higher costs.
We agree. I think we all agree around this table.
Pickup trucks.
But I'm just thinking that was
Yeah,
part
but that's-
of the reasoning that I believe he's got in his head, and how what Navarro and those guys are telling him is that, hey, this is going to be a cash grab that's going to make this country the strongest country on the planet because of all this money you're going to make, because you have 39% of the world's consumers with 4% of the world's population, and everyone wants to sell to you. So just get a percentage of that thing, and my God, you're going to have trillions of dollars coming in.
Yeah.
We don't need any income tax anymore. Let's go back to the days where we didn't have income tax.
Voodoo economics.
Or it's going to force companies to reduce their prices.
Yes. So it's okay. So what you said, and I wanted to bring this up earlier, and I didn't because we went someplace else, is the profitabilities of companies are going to come down. So as the quarters go by and you have the quarterly reports coming in, and all of a sudden everyone's profitability is down, the PE is going to the P of or the
price.
the E is going to be coming down.
Let's be careful because there are tax breaks coming for corporations as well. So again, it's the
Yes,
focus
they're
has to
paying
be on your net.
15% now?
The focus has to be on your net earnings.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's room for them to maneuver. It may not be as great as they need, but there is some room for them to maneuver. I think the bottom line is, listen, most businesses today, sizable businesses, are fairly well oiled in the sense that when they see their revenues declining or their forecasts for revenues are declining, they're pretty quick to adapt and to ensure that their costs are realigned.
Some companies.
Well,
Depends on the CEO, I would say, but anyway.
Yeah.
most sizable companies, I think the smaller businesses will struggle.
SMBs are going to be fucked.
Struggle.
Yeah.
They're going to be
But
fucked.
the large businesses,
Layoffs?
Yeah, but most businesses and most people are employed by small business, by SMB, small medium business in the U.S. So layoff.
but in the same, so small businesses, mom and pop shops, in the same
They're
way
gonna
as
suffer.
people who are at the lower end of income are going to be penalized by some of these
And isn't small business
practices.
and isn't small business still the biggest driver of the economy?
Yeah, it is. So stagflation, by the way, I kind of said this a while back. This is a perfect
I
recipe
mean,
for
government spending in the U.S.
So for me, this is the perfect recipe for stagflation that's coming out. So basically, your economy either stays the same or comes down. So recession, and at the same time you have inflation.
Yeah.
So this is a 1-2 punch. So now the Fed can't do anything. They're stuck. They're deer in the headlights because you can't raise, you can't lower because you raise, you affect one positively, the other one negatively, and vice versa. So they're in a position now.
Uncertainty tends to lead to paralysis.
Right, but stagflation from a Fed perspective also leads
But
to
it's
paralysis.
not. But you're absolutely right about the Fed. But it's also true of businesses. When
I agree. Yeah, uncertainty is
policies,
the worst thing.
right? Uncertainty
Worst
paralyzes
thing.
you.
Yeah. So we're in a fucked up place, guys. That's what we're trying to say, and it's not going to get better. And I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better.
You just described the recession that people now are predicting.
Yeah, I agree. That's part of the stagflation is the recession part. Yes.
Well, the likelihood of a recession.
Likelihood of a recession is going up, and inflation. So both recession and inflation happening in the next 3 to 6 months.
And what was
100%?
And what was his promise when he was running for president?
Egg prices would come down.
Inflation would he would eliminate inflation, and there would be historic
Easter's coming
economic
up.
growth.
Easter's coming up. All the eggs are going to be snatched up.
But he's fine. He's refined his message. He's saying, there's going to be short-term pain for long-term gain. And he'll say, and look, I'm doing what I said I would do in other areas.
Yeah.
Deportations are occurring, and
he'll spin it. He's a politician. He will spin it.
We're executing our agenda.
They all do.
Exactly.
Right.
They all do.
All right, guys.
So-
Any other spirited comments, Nuran, Aki?
So
Or did you guys get it out of your system?
I apologize for losing my mind.
Why?
It's fine.
Well, I just had to get it out.
It's fun. We love what we do. We love what we do.
I agree.
Right?
So, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I think I left it all out on the table. I think this is going to be a fucked up time globally. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty. It's going to be terrible for business, for small, medium business, for larger multinationals. Everyone's going to have issues that they have to deal with. And all this is done because one guy listened to another idiot.
Oh, okay.
That may
Nice
be-
summary.
Yeah, that may be true, but he's a bull in a china shop. So he's just trying to create, controversy to get things done. And I think
And do you think this is an effective way to do it?
it's not, but it's his way. So let's see how it turns out.
Yeah.
It'd be shit.
I think bulls in China shops are overrated. I'm really worried that a country with this type of economic power and success, historic success, when you look at all their economic metrics, everything from GDP per capita to wages, that a country with that level of success can turn around and say, I've been hard done by, therefore I'm going to throw everything out the window. That's very scary because that opens the door to all sorts of idiots and banana republics doing whatever the hell they want.
Is Canada one of them?
No, Dominic.
Yes.
Canada's not one of them.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a slightly different perspective and suggest that Trump has actually done the world a favor because there was a wake-up call required in many regions of the world, Canada for sure, Western Europe, and elsewhere,
I agree.
that have been riding the U.S. coattails for far too long and now realize that they need to implement policies, programs that are pro-business and to build economies that are strong, perhaps not in the immediate term because there are significant investments required, but in mid to longer term, much stronger and independent from the U.S.
And pull back some social programs.
There may not be a choice.
Yeah.
Exactly. Germany has an army now.
Well said.
Including subsidies to corporations.
Coming. It's coming.
It's coming.
You're right.
All right, guys. Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Spirited conversation.
I love it.
Yeah.
Hey, don't Go drink a chamomile.
Love you, Noran.
Thanks to our viewers and listeners for joining us, and we look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.